The fluorescent lights of Harvard Preparatory Academy flickered as Maya Parker clutched her acceptance letter, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of joy, despite having just received a full scholarship, but tears of humiliation as milk dripped from her second-hand backpack, seeping into her carefully preserved textbooks. "Oops," my hand slipped, Olivia Thompson sneered, her designer purse swinging from her manicured fingers. "But honestly, I did you a favor. That bag belongs in a dumpster anyway." Across town, at the Morgan construction site, Hayes Parker's weathered hands trembled as he counted out crumpled dollar bills at Jerry's Bakery. His construction uniform was covered in dust, and his shoulders hunched from 12 hours of manual labor. "Just the small chocolate cake. Please," he wheezed, suppressing a cough that threatened to bring up blood. "It's my daughter's birthday." "That'll be $24.99, the cashier said, eyeing his worn work boots. Hayes pulled out the last $5 bill from his wallet, money meant for his blood pressure medication. The cake would be worth missing a few pills. Maya deserved something special on her birthday, especially now. Back at school, Maya salvaged what she could from her soaked backpack. A soggy piece of paper caught her eye, her father's daily lunch note, the ink now running to "My brilliant girl, who will change the world someday. Remember, wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in love. Love, Dad." The contrast couldn't have been starker as Olivia and her friends sashayed past in their designer uniforms, loudly discussing their upcoming shopping spree at Rodeo Drive. Their laughter echoed through the hallway as Maya carefully folded the wet note and tucked it into her pocket. "Did you hear?" Olivia's voice carried deliberately. "Daddy just bought me a Range Rover for getting a B in chemistry. Maybe if your dad worked a little harder, you could afford actual clothes instead of those thrift store rejects." What they couldn't see was Hayes, now doubled over in the construction site bathroom, coughing violently into a handkerchief stained crimson. He straightened up, wiped his mouth, and looked in the mirror. "Just hold on a little longer," he whispered to his reflection. "She just needs to get to Harvard. Then she'll be okay." The birthday cake sat in its box on the sink counter, its cheap plastic container a stark reminder of all he couldn't give his daughter. Or so everyone thought. If this opening scene touched your heart and you'd like to follow Maya's journey of resilience, love, and hidden truths, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support enables us to continue creating meaningful stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community. Hayes Parker wasn't always the weathered construction worker people saw today. 20 years ago, he was Hayes Parker, CEO of Parker Investments, one of Boston's most prestigious financial firms. His corner office on the 47th floor overlooked the harbor, and his name regularly appeared in the Wall Street Journal. But that Hayes Parker died the day he discovered the truth about his company's dealings. Born into wealth himself, Hayes had watched his own parents chase money at the expense of everything else. His childhood memories consisted of empty mansions, absent parents, and extravagant gifts that could never fill the void of loneliness. When he married Sarah, a middle school teacher who loved him for who he was rather than his wealth, he promised himself his children would have a different life. The transformation began when he uncovered irregular accounts during a routine audit. Deeper investigation revealed a massive fraud scheme that reached the highest levels of the company's board. His partners had been embezzling from pension funds, destroying thousands of families' life savings. The evidence sat in his desk drawer like a ticking bomb. That night, Hayes came home to find his 4-year-old daughter Maya asleep on the couch, clutching a drawing she'd made for him. Next to her sat Emma, his 8-year-old, who had waited up just to show him her perfect spelling test. The decision crystallized in that moment. The next day, Hayes walked into the SEC office with a detailed report of the fraud. But his partners had anticipated him. By the time he returned home, his resignation had been announced, citing personal reasons. His partners had orchestrated a perfect escape, leaving Hayes with a choice: accept a modest settlement and stay quiet, or fight a legal battle he couldn't win against some of Boston's most powerful people. Hayes chose his children's future over his reputation. He took the settlement, moved his family to a modest neighborhood, and took a job in construction. The millions he'd earned legitimately were placed in a secret trust for his daughter's future. To the world, Hayes Parker, the financial wizard, had suffered a nervous breakdown and abandoned his career. Only his wife Sarah knew the truth, and together they decided to raise their daughters away from the corrupting influence of wealth. They would learn the value of hard work, the importance of character over cash, and the true meaning of wealth, the kind that couldn't be measured in dollars. For 15 years, Hayes worked with his hands, building the very towers he once occupied. He packed simple lunches with loving notes, helped with homework at their small kitchen table, and created the warm, present childhood he never had. His calloused hands taught his daughters to ride bikes, built blanket forts in their living room, and wiped away tears after tough days at school. The former CEO became known in the neighborhood as the kindest construction worker around, always ready to help fix a neighbor's leak or repair a broken fence. No one suspected that the man in the worn work boots had once controlled billions in assets, or that his daughter's college funds could buy their entire block. But now, as cancer ate away at his strength, Hayes faced his final challenge. The wealth he'd hidden away would soon pass to his family. His only hope was that the values he'd instilled would prove stronger than the allure of sudden riches. Every morning, as he penned another lunch note to Maya or listened to Emma's dreams of becoming a teacher like her mother, he prayed he'd done enough to show them that true wealth lived in the heart, not the wallet. What his colleagues had dismissed as weakness, choosing family over fortune, integrity over influence, Hayes knew was his greatest strength. He traded his corner office for something far more valuable: his children's smiles, their trust, and the kind of memories money could never buy. Maya Parker stood at her locker, carefully arranging her worn textbooks in size order, a habit she'd developed to make her second-hand supplies last longer. At 17, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that seemed at odds with her thrift store clothing and patched backpack. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her deep brown eyes held a wisdom beyond her years. Unlike her peers at Harvard Preparatory Academy, Maya's achievements didn't come from expensive tutors or prestigious summer programs. Every A on her transcript represented countless nights studying at the kitchen table after helping her father with his physical therapy exercises. Her perfect SAT score wasn't from a $2,000 prep course, but from library books and free online resources she studied during lunch breaks while others shopped at the mall. The contrast between Maya and her classmates extended beyond academics. While they shared Instagram stories from Aspen ski trips and Mediterranean cruises, Maya treasured the small moments: Sunday morning pancakes with her father, who always shaped them into mathematical equations; movie nights in blanket forts that transformed their modest living room into a palace of imagination; and the daily lunch notes that had become her armor against the world's cruelty. But Maya's resilience wasn't born from deprivation, it came from love. Where others saw a construction worker's daughter, she saw a father who taught her to solve complex physics problems while fixing the neighbor's leaky faucet. When classmates mocked her clothes, she remembered her father's words: character is the only fashion that never goes out of style. Her sister Emma might have embraced the role of social outcast, burning with resentment at their apparent poverty, but Maya found strength in it. She tutored younger students for free, organized book drives for the local library, and spent weekends helping elderly neighbors with their groceries. Her college application essay wasn't about overcoming hardship, it was about finding abundance in unexpected places. Teachers often remarked on Maya's unusual maturity. When wealthy parents complained about their children receiving lower grades than the scholarship case, Maya responded by offering to tutor their kids. When bullies ruined her art project, she stayed late to help clean the art room. Her revenge was excellence. Her defense was kindness. Yet beneath her composed exterior, Maya harbored dreams as big as any of her privileged peers. Her notebook margins were filled with sketches of medical devices she hoped to design one day, innovations inspired by watching her father struggle with chronic pain. Her Harvard application wasn't just about escaping poverty, it was about creating change. What no one at school knew was how Maya spent her evenings sitting beside her father's bed, reading scientific journals aloud while he rested between coughing fits, or helping her mother calculate bills with spreadsheets she'd designed to stretch every dollar. She'd learned more about economics from their kitchen table financial summits than any classroom could teach. The irony wasn't lost on Maya that her classmates pitied her for being poor while she pitied them for not recognizing their own poverty, the poverty of spirit that came from valuing price tags over people. Each time Olivia Thompson flaunted a new designer bag, Maya touched the folded lunch note in her pocket, rich in the currency that mattered most. As she closed her locker, Maya caught her reflection in its scratched metal surface. She saw not the charity case her classmates whispered about, but her father's daughter, strong, principled, and wealthy in ways money couldn't measure. Her acceptance letter to Harvard wasn't just a ticket to a better future, it was proof that character, resilience, and love could build a fortune that no bank could hold. Emma Parker, Maya's older sister, walked the halls of Boston Community College like a coiled spring of resentment. At 21, she'd inherited their mother's classic beauty, but wore it like armor. Her fashionably distressed jeans and carefully curated thrift store finds masking a deeper anger. Unlike Maya, Emma remembered fragments of their former life, glimpses of a grand house, designer clothes, and the respect that came with the Parker name. Her choice to study education wasn't just about following their mother's footsteps, it was about proving she could succeed despite what she saw as their father's inexplicable downfall. Sarah Parker, once the elegant wife of a CEO, had transformed into a different kind of graceful. Her hands, now roughened from years of bargain hunting and coupon clipping, still moved with the same poise, whether grading middle school papers or mending worn clothes. She carried the weight of her husband's secret with quiet strength, channeling her former social skills into building a supportive community in their modest neighborhood. Her students at Jefferson Middle School never knew she once hosted charity galas. They only saw the teacher who bought extra supplies for kids who couldn't afford them. Olivia Thompson, Maya's primary tormentor, lived in the world Hayes Parker had rejected. Her father, Richard Thompson, sat on the board of the very company Hayes had left, his conscience as polished as his Italian leather shoes. Olivia had never known want, but she'd also never known the warmth of a family dinner that wasn't interrupted by business calls. Her cruelty toward Maya masked a deeper envy of the genuine love she witnessed in the Parker family. Brandon Miller, Maya's advanced physics teacher, saw beyond the social hierarchy of Harvard Preparatory Academy. A former Silicon Valley engineer who'd chosen teaching over profit, he recognized in Maya the same hunger for knowledge he'd once possessed. His quiet advocacy had helped secure her scholarship, and his classroom became her sanctuary during lunch periods. Claire Anderson, the school counselor, kept a special eye on Maya while harboring her own suspicions about the Parker family. Something about Hayes' demeanor didn't match his supposed background, and she'd noticed how easily Maya grasped complex financial concepts despite her apparent poverty. Yet she respected the family's privacy, focusing instead on protecting Maya from the worst of the school's social politics. The supporting cast of Maya's life extended beyond the school's walls. There was Mr. Rodriguez, the librarian who accidentally left advanced engineering books on Maya's favorite table, Mrs. Chen from the corner store, who always had a surplus of snacks to share when Maya helped her stock shelves, and old Mr. Sullivan, whose broken fence became an impromptu physics lesson when Hayes taught Maya about leverage and force while repairing it. These characters orbited the Parkers' lives like stars around a hidden sun, each drawn to the warmth of a family that measured wealth in moments rather than millions. They witnessed the daily kindnesses, Hayes sharing his lunch with newer construction workers, Sarah staying late to help struggling students, Maya tutoring kids who'd bullied her, and even Emma's reluctant participation in community projects. Together, they formed a tapestry of relationships that would be tested when the truth about Hayes' fortune emerged. Some, like Olivia, would be forced to confront their prejudices. Others, like Brandon Miller, would see their faith in the family's integrity vindicated. Each would play a crucial role in the unfolding drama as the Parkers' carefully constructed world began to shift, their reactions revealing that true character, like real wealth, often hides beneath the surface. As Maya navigated her senior year, these individuals would become both challenges and champions in her journey, their intertwined stories contributing to a larger narrative about the true meaning of wealth, success, and family. Their presence would help shape not just Maya's future, but their own understanding of what it means to be truly rich. The incident that would begin unraveling the Parkers' carefully constructed life occurred on a crisp October morning. Maya arrived at school wearing a navy blue cashmere sweater, a rare treasure her father had found at a high-end consignment shop after months of overtime work. He'd presented it to her wrapped in newspaper, his calloused hands trembling with pride as she opened it. "For your Harvard interview next week," he'd said, coughing slightly into his handkerchief. "Is that my sweater?" Amanda Collins's voice cut through the pre-first period chatter. The daughter of a prominent surgeon, Amanda stood at the center of Olivia Thompson's elite circle. "I lost that exact sweater last month. It even has the same thread pull on the left sleeve." Maya's heart sank as she touched the tiny imperfection, the very flaw that had made the sweater affordable. "No, this is mine. My dad bought it for me." "From where?" "The five-finger discount store," Olivia sneered, her designer handbag swinging as she circled Maya like a shark. "Everyone knows your dad can barely afford your lunch, let alone cashmere." A crowd began to gather in the hallway. Maya clutched her worn backpack tighter, feeling the reassuring crinkle of her father's lunch note inside. "It's from Second Chance's consignment on Maple Street. I can show you the receipt." "Right?" Amanda scoffed. "The same place where my mum donated my old clothes last month." Including this sweater. She reached out and grabbed Maya's arm, her manicured nails digging into the soft wool. "Take it off, now." "Is there a problem here?" Claire Anderson's voice carried the weight of authority as the school counselor approached. But before Maya could explain, Amanda's theatrical tears began. "She stole my sweater, Ms. Anderson. My parents paid $300 for it at Nordstrom, and she just walked in wearing it like nothing happened." The next hour passed in a blur of accusations and declarations. Security cameras showed Maya at her locker that morning, unpacking her backpack. Amanda's mother arrived, waving the original receipt from Nordstrom. Maya's trembling fingers couldn't locate her father's consignment shop receipt in her meticulously organized folders. Given the seriousness of the accusation, Principal Harrison intoned from behind his mahogany desk, "We have no choice but to suspend Maya pending a full investigation. This could affect your disciplinary record and, by extension, your Harvard acceptance." Maya sat perfectly still, her father's words echoing in her head. "Character is built in moments when doing the right thing is the hardest thing." But as she looked at the smug faces of Amanda and Olivia waiting outside the principal's office, she wondered if character alone could protect the future she'd worked so hard to build. "We'll need to contact your parents, Ms. Anderson said gently. "Would you like to call them?" Maya's hand shook as she reached for her phone. How could she tell her father about this? He'd worked overtime for months, skipping his own meals to save for that sweater. She'd seen him wincing in pain after long days at the construction site, but he'd waved off her concerns, just a little tired. "Sweetheart, nothing to worry about." As she dialed home, Maya caught a glimpse of herself in the office window. The sweater that was supposed to help her fit in at her Harvard interview had instead become evidence of her supposed crimes. The irony wasn't lost on her. Trying to appear wealthy enough for Harvard had only reinforced everyone's belief in her poverty. Mum, Maya's voice cracked slightly. "Can you and Dad come to school? There's been a mistake." She paused, watching Amanda and Olivia whisper and giggle outside. "And Mom, can you bring the receipt from Second Chances, the one in Dad's special folder?" What Maya didn't know was that at that very moment, Hayes Parker was sitting in his truck outside the construction site, staring at another set of medical results that would make the sweater incident seem trivial. His fingers, still dusty from the morning's work, traced the word stage 4 as he listened to his wife's voicemail about the school's call. "Just hold on," he whispered to himself, tucking the medical papers into his lunchbox next to Maya's latest report card, all A's, as usual. She just needs to get through this year. Then everything will be okay. He started the truck, unaware that this accusation would set in motion events that would expose not just the truth about the sweater, but everything he'd spent 15 years hiding. The Harvard Admissions Committee's email arrived during Maya's suspension, its subject line a dagger to her heart regarding your early admission status. Brandon Miller found her in the school library, where she'd been permitted to study during her suspension, her eyes fixed on her second-hand laptop screen. "Miss Anderson told me about the email," he said softly, pulling up a chair. "Want to talk about it?" Maya turned the laptop toward him, her hands steady despite the trembling in her voice. "They're reviewing my acceptance due to the recent disciplinary action. They're giving me 2 weeks to provide context and clarification before making a final decision." The library's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on her face, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. The past week had been a cascade of disasters. The consignment shop's computer system had crashed, taking with it all records of recent sales. Her father had been too ill to come to the disciplinary hearing, just a bad cold, he'd insisted, leaving Sarah to defend her daughter alone against the Collins family's private attorney. "This isn't just about the sweater anymore, is it?" Brandon asked, noting the college financial aid forms peeking out from under Maya's textbooks. "No," Maya whispered. "The Collins family is questioning everything. My grades, my test scores, my extracurriculars. They're suggesting I must have cheated to achieve them. Given my background, their lawyer even implied that my tutoring program was a front for selling answers to tests." The irony was brutal. The same privilege that allowed Amanda Collins to falsely claim theft was now being wielded to destroy Maya's future. Every achievement that had come from late-night studying, every honor earned through pure merit, was being recast as suspicious because of her perceived poverty. "They're demanding an audit of all my academic work," Maya continued, her voice hollow. "Principal Harrison has agreed to their request for a thorough review of my entire academic history. And Harvard." She swallowed hard. "Harvard wants to know why I never disclosed my ongoing disciplinary issues during the application process." Brandon's jaw tightened. He'd written one of Maya's recommendation letters, praising her extraordinary ability to explain complex physics concepts to struggling students. Now that same peer tutoring program was being used as evidence against her. "What does your father say about all this?" he asked carefully, noting how Maya flinched at the mention of Hayes. Maya paused, remembering her father's racking cough during their brief phone conversation that morning. "He's not feeling well. Mom says he just needs rest, but..." She pulled out a crumpled lunch note from her pocket, her father's usually steady handwriting noticeably shaky. "Remember, sweetheart, storms don't last forever. Keep your head high." Brandon watched as his brightest student methodically organized her appeal documents. The girl who could derive complex equations in her head was now reduced to defending her basic integrity. Her college essays about finding beauty in adversity were being twisted into proof of deception. "Maya," he said finally, "what do you need right now? Not what Harvard needs, not what the school board wants, what do you need?" She looked up, and for a moment her composure cracked. "I need people to believe me. I need them to understand that being poor doesn't make me a thief or a cheater. I need..." Her voice broke slightly. "I need my dad to be okay. He keeps saying he is. But something's wrong, Mr. Miller. I can feel it." The library clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Outside, they could hear Olivia Thompson's group laughing, their voices carrying through the window as they discussed their upcoming spring break in the Maldives. The contrast was stark. While they planned luxury vacations, Maya was fighting to keep her future from unraveling. 2 weeks, Brandon said finally. We have 2 weeks to prove them wrong. And Maya, he waited until she met his eyes. You're not alone in this fight. What neither of them knew was that across town, Hayes Parker was sitting in another sterile doctor's office, receiving news that would make the Harvard crisis seem insignificant. As his oncologist discussed treatment options, Hayes's mind was on the acceptance letter framed in Maya's room. He had 2 weeks to decide between aggressive treatment that might buy him more time but destroy their savings, or letting nature take its course and preserving Maya's college fund. In both father and daughter's minds, the same thought echoed. Sometimes the highest price we pay isn't measured in dollars. Hayes Parker's secret began to unravel on a Wednesday afternoon at the Morgan construction site. He'd been fighting through another wave of dizziness, determined to finish his shift despite the burning in his chest. The world tilted suddenly, steel beams blurring before his eyes, and then the ground rushed up to meet him. Parker's "down the shout" echoed across the site as his co-workers rushed to where he lay crumpled beside a stack of lumber. Blood stained his lips, his breathing ragged and shallow. Someone was calling 911, while Pete, his site supervisor for the past decade, cradled his head. "Hang in there," Hayes Pete murmured, his weathered face creased with concern. "Help's coming." He reached for Hayes's wallet to find emergency contacts, and a paper fluttered out, a medical document Hayes had been carrying close to his heart. The emergency room at Boston General was a stark contrast to the private hospitals Hayes had once frequented as a CEO. Dr. Rebecca Chen studied his charts with growing concern, her eyes moving between the new tests and the wrinkled papers Pete had found at the site. "Mr. Parker," she said quietly, pulling up a chair beside his bed, "these previous test results, they're from 6 months ago. You were diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer and declined treatment. Why?" Hayes looked at his calloused hands, now connected to IV lines. "My daughter. She got into Harvard. Full scholarship. But there are expenses: books, housing, meals. The treatment costs would have eaten through everything I saved for her future." Dr. Chen's expression softened. "And now it's stage 4. Mr. Parker, we need to contact your family." "Please," Hayes whispered, his voice rough. "Let me tell them myself." "Just. Not today. Maya has her disciplinary hearing tomorrow. She needs to focus on that." But fate had other plans. Sarah Parker was already in the hospital parking lot, having received the call from Pete. As she hurried through the emergency room doors, she passed a young doctor discussing Hayes's case with a colleague. Terminal lung cancer, been hiding it for months, refused treatment to save money for his kids. Sarah's world stopped. The past months suddenly snapped into focus: the increasing fatigue, the hidden coughs, the handkerchief she'd found stained with blood in the laundry. Her husband, the former CEO who'd chosen integrity over wealth, had once again sacrificed himself for their children. In Hayes's room, Sarah found him attempting to write another lunch note for Maya, his hands trembling as he tried to maintain the cheerful tone that had sustained their daughter through years of hardship. "Remember, sweetheart, every challenge is an opportunity." How long? Sarah's voice cut through the mechanical beeping of monitors. "How long have you known?" Hayes looked up, meeting his wife's tears with a sad smile. "Since Maya's acceptance letter came. The initial diagnosis, it was the same day. All those extra shifts. The overtime." Sarah's voice broke. "You weren't saving for her textbooks, were you? You were trying to build up our emergency fund before." "Before I couldn't work anymore," Hayes finished quietly. "I thought I had more time. Just needed to get her through this year, get her settled at Harvard." Then he gestured weakly at himself. "Then this wouldn't matter so much." Sarah sank into the chair beside his bed, taking his rough hand in hers. "She deserves to know, Hayes. They both do. All these years we've taught them about integrity, about honesty. And about protecting the ones you love, Hayes countered, then doubled over with a coughing fit that left fresh blood on his hospital gown. Maya's fighting for her future right now. If she knows about this, you know our daughter. She'll give up Harvard to stay home, get a job, try to help. The room fell silent except for the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Outside, the Boston skyline glittered with the same lights that had once shone through Hayes's executive office. Now they illuminated a different kind of wealth, the kind that made a man work through terminal illness to secure his daughter's dreams, that turned a former CEO into a construction worker to protect his children's values. One more day, Hayes pleaded softly. Let her get through the hearing tomorrow. Then I'll tell them everything. About the cancer, about our past, about who we really are. Just give her one more day to fight her battle before she has to face mine. Sarah looked at her husband, still protecting, still planning, still putting their children first even as his own time slipped away. She leaned forward and kissed his forehead, tasting the salt of her own tears. One more day, she whispered. But not a day more. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, but Maya Parker sat alone in the school conference room at 8:45, straightening her father's carefully pressed construction uniform jacket. Hayes had insisted on lending it to her for luck. He'd said through the hospital phone, since he couldn't be there himself. The familiar scent of sawdust and his favorite coffee still clung to the fabric. Miss Parker, Principal Harrison's voice cut through her thoughts. Your mother called. She won't be able to attend either. He paused, studying the girl who'd never missed a day of school until the suspension. Under the circumstances, we should reschedule. But Maya straightened her shoulders, her father's oversized jacket making her look both smaller and somehow stronger. No, sir, I'm prepared to speak for myself. The room filled quickly. Amanda Collins and her parents, their lawyer in an expensive suit, Olivia Thompson, and her father, who sat on the school board, M.S. Anderson, and Mr. Miller, who'd insisted on being present as Maya's faculty advocate. The evidence lay spread across the mahogany table: the contested sweater, Amanda's Nordstrom receipt, security camera footage. Maya had just opened her folder of character references when her phone buzzed, a text from her mother hospital. Emergency. Come now. The blood drained from her face as she read the next words. Dad, critical. Hurry. Miss Parker, Principal Harrison's voice seemed to come from far away. We're ready to begin. Maya looked up at the faces around the table, the Collins family's smug certainty, Olivia's barely concealed glee, Mr. Miller's concern. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Character shows itself in how you handle the impossible moments. I apologize, she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. But I need to leave. My father is in the hospital. How convenient, Mrs. Collins sneered. Another excuse. Maya stood, her father's jacket hanging heavy on her shoulders. My father has never lied in his life, and neither have I. I didn't steal the sweater. He bought it for me with money he earned working overtime, probably when he was already sick. And now. Her voice caught for just a moment. Now he needs me more than I need to prove anything to you. She turned to Principal Harrison. Expel me if you have to. Rescind my Harvard acceptance, but I have to go to my father. Brandon Miller stood as well. I'll drive you. The drive to Boston General passed in a blur of silent prayers and unanswered calls to her mother. When they arrived at the ICU, Maya ran past the nurse's station, still wearing her father's jacket, still clutching her folder of evidence meant for the hearing. She found them in room 427. Her mother sat holding Hayes's hand, while Emma stood by the window, her usual defensive posture replaced by something more fragile. The machine's breathing for her father beeped in steady rhythm. Maya. Dr. Chen stepped forward. Your father has been battling stage 4 lung cancer. He's been hiding it for months, refusing treatment to preserve your college fund. Tonight his right lung collapsed. We've stabilized him, but the world tilted on its axis. Maya gripped the doorframe, her mind racing back through the past months, the increasing fatigue he'd blamed on long hours, the cough he'd dismissed as allergies, the weight loss he'd attributed to working hard. But all lies, the first lies he'd ever told her. "How long?" she whispered. "He was diagnosed the day your Harvard acceptance came," Sarah answered softly. "He didn't want anything to overshadow your achievement." Maya moved to her father's bedside, taking in the tubes and monitors that seemed to dwarf his strong frame. His calloused hand, the one that had written thousands of lunch notes, lay pale against the white sheets. She picked it up, feeling its familiar roughness. The hearing, her mother asked. "I left," Maya replied, not taking her eyes off her father's face. "Some things matter more than Harvard." As if he heard her, Hayes's eyes fluttered open. Despite the oxygen mask, he tried to smile. His free hand moved weakly toward the bedside table, where a crumpled paper lay one last lunch note he'd tried to write before collapsing. Maya picked it up, smoothing the shaky handwriting. "Remember, sweetheart, true wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you give. I've given you everything I am. The rest is just paper." The machines beeped in steady rhythm as Maya sat beside her father, still wearing his jacket, still holding his hand. Outside the hospital window, the sun rose over Boston, painting the sky in shades of gold that would have cost millions to capture in paint, but were free for anyone who cared to look up. In that moment, watching her father fight for each breath, Maya understood that some types of wealth couldn't be stolen or questioned by any disciplinary board. The real fortune had been there all along, written in 1,000 lunch notes, built into every blanket fort, wrapped in newspaper like a second-hand sweater, and given freely with a love that no amount of money could measure. The truth about Hayes Parker's past emerged not with a bang but with a whisper, carried in on the heels of his medical crisis. As he lay unconscious in the ICU, Claudia Morgan, the hospital's patient liaison, froze when she saw his name on the admission forms. "Sarah Parker," she approached Maya's mother in the ICU waiting room. "I believe there's been a mistake. Your insurance information. It shows your husband as a construction worker, but I remember Hayes Parker from the board of directors." Sarah's face went pale. 15 years of careful pretense began to crumble as Claudia continued. "He donated the entire oncology wing. His portrait used to hang in the lobby before he requested its removal." Emma, who had been pacing nearby, stopped mid-stride. "What did you just say?" Before Sarah could intervene, an elderly doctor hurried into the waiting room, his face lighting up with recognition. "Hayes Parker? Good God, I thought he'd moved abroad. Best chairman this hospital ever had. The research grants he established." The doctor trailed off, noting Sarah's expression. "Oh, they didn't know." Maya stood frozen, her father's worn jacket suddenly feeling like a costume rather than a comfort. "Mom." Sarah sank into a chair, 15 years of shared secrets weighing heavily on her shoulders. "Your father, he had his reasons. We both did." The story spilled out in the sterile hospital waiting room. Hayes Parker, the brilliant CEO who'd uncovered corruption in his own company, the choice between silence and justice, the deliberate descent into apparent poverty to protect their children from the corrupting influence of wealth. All those extra shifts, Emma's voice cracked, the overtime, the cheap clothes. It was all a lie. "No," Sarah replied firmly. "The love was real. The values were real. The only lie was about the money." As if on cue, Greg Thompson, not Olivia's father, but another man in an impeccable suit, appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Parker, I'm your husband's attorney. Given the circumstances, I think it's time to discuss the trust funds." "Trust funds," Maya echoed weakly. Greg opened his briefcase, spreading documents across the waiting room table. "Your father converted most of his assets to educational and charitable trusts before stepping down from Parker Investments. The bulk of his personal fortune, roughly $40 million, has been gathering interest for 15 years, divided equally among his children." Emma collapsed into a chair, her carefully cultivated thrift store cheeks suddenly feeling like a cruel joke. "We're millionaires. All this time." "Your father," Greg continued gently, "believed that character is built through adversity, not advantage. He wanted you to understand the value of hard work, the meaning of true wealth." Maya fingered the lunch notes in her father's jacket pocket, each one written by a millionaire's hand, calloused from voluntary labor. The construction job was his choice, Sarah finished. He said he wanted to build something real for a change, not just move money around. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "He's asking for them." They found Hayes awake but weak, his eyes clearer than they'd been in days. Emma spoke first, her voice uncharacteristically small. "Why, Dad? Why make us live like we were poor?" Hayes's response was interrupted by coughing, but when he caught his breath, his voice was firm. "I grew up with everything, except what mattered. My parents thought money could replace presence. I wanted better for you." But the bullying Emma pressed, the social isolation, the shame. Hayes's eyes filled with tears. "I've never been more proud than watching you both become women of character. Money can't buy that." Maya stepped forward, still wearing his jacket. "The sweater. The one that started all this? You knew we could afford better." "I knew," Hayes whispered, "that anything bought with honest work has more value than everything I used to own." Another coughing fit seized him. Dr. Chen appeared, checking his vitals with concern. "He needs rest." But Hayes gripped Maya's hand. "The Harvard hearing." "I left," she said quietly. "Some things matter more." A weak smile crossed Hayes's face. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd learn." His eyes drifted shut as the medication pulled him under. Outside his room, Greg Thompson cleared his throat. "There's more." Hayes left instructions about the Collins family. Sarah's head snapped up. Amanda Collins's parents. They were involved in the original fraud he uncovered. He kept the evidence. "All of it," said, "someday it might protect you." Maya stood at her father's window, watching his chest rise and fall with mechanical precision. The man she'd known as a humble construction worker had been protecting them all along, not just from poverty, but from the corruption of wealth itself. Every overtime shift, every second-hand purchase, every missed social event had been a deliberate choice, an investment in character over comfort. In her pocket, his last lunch note crinkled, "True wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you give." Standing there, watching the sunrise paint gold across her father's sleeping face, Maya realized that some fortunes can't be measured in dollars, and some investments yield returns that no bank could ever calculate. 3 days after the revelation, Hayes Parker had a moment of startling clarity. The doctors called it terminal lucidity, that mysterious surge of energy some patients experience near the end. For a few precious hours he was fully himself again, free from the morphine haze that had clouded his mind. "Maya," he called softly, his voice stronger than it had been in days. She was at his bedside instantly, still wearing his jacket despite the hospital's warmth. "There's something else I need to tell you." Sarah and Emma gathered closer as Hayes struggled to sit up. His face, though gaunt, held the same determined expression they remembered from thousands of morning breakfasts and bedtime stories. "The sweater," he began, "the one that started all this? I didn't buy it at second chances." He paused, catching his breath. "I bought it new, from Nordstrom, the same day Amanda Collins's mother returned hers." Maya's hand flew to her mouth. "But the receipt is in my toolbox at home, along with the security camera footage from the store." Hayes's eyes held a familiar twinkle. "Old habits from my investigative days. Always keep evidence." "You knew this would happen?" Emma asked, incredulous. Hayes shook his head, triggering a small coughing fit. When it passed, he continued, I knew Richard Thompson was pressuring the school board about Maya's scholarship. Knew they'd try something, the sweater. It was bait. You let them accuse me of theft. Maya's voice held more wonder than accusation. I let them show their true colors. Hayes corrected gently. The same colors they showed 15 years ago when they destroyed thousands of lives through their fraud. Only this time his voice strengthened with pride. This time I made sure the evidence was clear. Sarah squeezed his hand, always protecting them, even now. The construction job wasn't just about teaching values, Hayes admitted. It kept me invisible. Let me watch, gather evidence. The Thompsons, the Tollins, they never suspected their former CEO was literally building their homes, listening to their conversations about ongoing schemes. Maya sat heavily in the bedside chair. All those times you came home exhausted. But some nights were research, not overtime, Hayes nodded. Building a case. Insurance in case they ever came after you girls. His breathing grew more labored. The cancer. It forced my timeline. Had to make sure. You were protected. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, frowning at his vital signs, but Hayes waved her away. My daughters need to understand. He turned to Emma first. The anger you've carried, about our lifestyle, it protected you too, kept you from falling into their world. You became strong, independent, real. Emma's carefully constructed walls crumbled as she laid her head on her father's shoulder, crying like the little girl who used to crawl into his lap during thunderstorms. And Maya, his voice softened. Your Harvard dream. It's yours, you earned it. Every grade, every achievement. Pure merit. The trust fund, it was always there, but I needed you to know. You could succeed on your own. The monitors began beeping more urgently. Dr. Chen stepped forward, but Hayes gripped Maya's hand with surprising strength. The evidence is all there. In my toolbox, every document, every recording. Enough to protect your future. And maybe help those families from 15 years ago. His voice grew fainter. But the choice, whether to use it, that's yours now. Dad, Maya's voice broke. I don't care about Harvard anymore. Just stay, please. Hayes smiled, the same gentle smile that had greeted them every morning of their lives. You'll care again. Dreams don't die. They just transform. Like wealth, like love. The monitor's beeping became more erratic. Dr. Chen moved forward with purpose this time, and the room filled with medical staff. Remember, Hayes whispered as they prepared to intubate him again, true wealth. ... isn't in what you own, but in what you give his family finished together. As the doctors worked, Maya stood at the window, her father's jacket wrapped tight around her shoulders. Below, the hospital's front entrance was clearly visible, where Amanda Collins and her mother were just arriving for their regular charity board meeting. They walked past the construction workers repairing the hospital's front steps, never glancing at the men who labored in plain sight. Maya touched the lunch note in her pocket, then reached into the jacket's inner pocket and found something else, a small key with a tag reading storage unit 247. Her father had planned everything, protected everything, thought of everything. Even now, even here, he was teaching them one last lesson about the true meaning of wealth, love and justice. Outside, the construction workers finished their task, building something solid and real that would support thousands of passing feet, just as Hayes Parker had built a foundation of truth and character that would outlast any fortune, any accusation, any trial that lay ahead. The monitors stabilized, but Hayes didn't regain consciousness. Yet his last message hung in the air, more valuable than any inheritance. Character, built through adversity, was the only wealth that truly mattered. Hayes Parker passed away quietly on a Sunday morning as sunlight streamed through the hospital window. His last conscious act had been to squeeze Maya's hand 3 times, their secret code for "I love you" since she was small. The funeral that followed reflected his values, simple, dignified, and open to anyone who wished to attend. Construction workers in their best clothes sat alongside hospital board members, while his daughters greeted mourners in second-hand black dresses that now carried a different kind of weight. The reading of the will took place in Greg Thompson's office a week later. The stark, modern office with its view of Boston Harbor couldn't have been more different from the modest Parker home. Maya sat between her mother and sister, still wearing her father's jacket despite the spring warmth. "Before we begin," Greg said, placing a weathered metal toolbox on his desk. Hayes left specific instructions about the timing of certain revelations. Inside the toolbox lay an orchestrated explosion, files documenting 15 years of corporate fraud, USB drives containing recorded conversations and photographs of secret meetings. But atop it all sat a single envelope addressed to my girls. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it, reading aloud. "My dearest family. If you're reading this, I've moved on to where material wealth holds no meaning. But I leave you something far more valuable than money: the truth about who you are and who you can become. The fortune you've inherited isn't just in the trust funds. It's in every moment we shared, every lesson learned, every challenge overcome. The money, roughly $40 million each for Maya and Emma, is simply a tool. How you use it will reveal whether our years of voluntary simplicity taught you what matters most. To my Emma, your anger at our lifestyle wasn't wrong, it was honest. That honesty, combined with the strength you've built, will serve you well. The world needs more people who question everything, even their own father's choices. To my Maya, your Harvard dream wasn't about escaping poverty, it was about pursuing excellence. The trust fund was always there, but your achievements are entirely your own. Never doubt that. To my beloved Sarah, the second toolbox, the one behind my workbench, contains everything needed to clear my name in the corporate scandal. But the choice of whether to use it belongs to our daughters now. The money is yours, freely given. But remember, we were never poor. We were rich in the only ways that truly matter. All my love. Dad." The silence that followed was broken by Emma's quiet sobs. Maya stared out the window at the construction site across the street, where men like her father built something real beneath the spring sun. Greg cleared his throat. "There's more." Hayes left detailed documentation of recent attempts to sabotage Maya's Harvard admission, including evidence that the sweater incident was orchestrated by the Collins family. Maya turned sharply. He knew. He knew everything. Greg spread out surveillance photos showing Amanda's mother returning the sweater, then Hayes purchasing it an hour later. He was building a case, protecting you even then. Sarah touched the toolbox gently. All those extra shifts. Some were real construction work, Greg nodded. Others were surveillance. Hayes never stopped being the brilliant strategist who built Parker Investments. He just chose to build something more important, a foundation of character for his daughters. The implications slowly sank in. Their years of careful budgeting, of second-hand clothes and modest celebrations, had been an elaborate lesson in values. Every overtime shift had served dual purposes, teaching work ethic while gathering evidence. Even their small house had been strategically chosen, positioned to monitor the comings and goings of those who'd forced Hayes out of his company. "The Harvard disciplinary hearing is tomorrow," Greg continued. Hayes left specific instructions about timing. "The question is, do you want to use this information?" Maya stood and walked to the window. Below, construction workers laid foundations that would support buildings long after they were gone. Her father had done the same for her, building a foundation of truth and character that no amount of money could buy or corrupt. "No," she said finally, "not yet." Maya, Emma protested. "They tried to destroy your future." "And in doing so, they revealed who they really are." Maya touched her father's jacket pocket, where his last lunch note rested. "Dad spent 15 years gathering this evidence, not just for justice, but to teach us something about patience, about timing, about using power wisely." She turned back to her family. I want to face the hearing on my own terms first. Let them show everyone who they really are. Just like Dad did 15 years ago. The truth isn't just in these documents, it's in who we've become because of his choices. Sarah watched her daughter with growing pride. The weight of wealth hadn't changed her. If anything, it had reinforced the values Hayes had worked so hard to instill. Besides, Maya added, a familiar determination in her eyes, Dad always said true wealth isn't in what you own. ... But in what you give, they finished together. Outside, the construction workers finished another foundation, solid and true beneath the surface, supporting whatever would be built above. Just as Hayes Parker had built his greatest legacy not in fortunes or evidence, but in the unshakable character of his daughters. The sudden transition from perceived poverty to immense wealth affected each member of the Parker family differently. In the weeks following Hayes' death, their modest home became a study in contrasts, much like the lives they had led. Sarah Parker stood in her kitchen, still making coffee in the same chipped mugs, though her bank account could now buy a coffee plantation. The morning routine remained unchanged: breakfast at the worn table, moments of silence as they all noticed the empty chair where Hayes should have been. But subtle changes had begun to emerge. Emma, who had once scrimped and saved for thrift store finds, arrived home one evening with shopping bags from designer boutiques. "I bought us all new wardrobes," she announced, her voice a mixture of defiance and guilt. "We don't have to pretend anymore." Maya watched as her sister pulled out silk blouses and cashmere sweaters, each price tag representing what their father used to earn in a week of construction work. "We never were pretending," she said quietly. Dad's lessons were real. The divide between the sisters deepened as they processed their inheritance differently. Emma threw herself into exploring their new wealth, replacing their furniture with expensive pieces, hiring staff to clean the house they'd always maintained themselves. Each change felt like an erasure of their father's carefully constructed world. "We can move to a better neighborhood," Emma suggested one evening, as their mother served dinner on their old plates despite the new china sitting unused in boxes. "We can live the life we were meant to have." "We already had the life we were meant to have," Maya countered, still wearing her father's jacket despite the summer heat. "Dad chose this life for us. All of it." Sarah watched her daughters struggle with their new reality, remembering the conversation she'd had with Hayes years ago when they'd first decided to live modestly despite their wealth. "Money doesn't build character," he'd said. "Choices do." The contrast became starker when Emma began driving a new Mercedes, parking it beside Maya's still functional used car in their modest driveway. Neighbors who had known them for years began to whisper, their friendly waves becoming uncertain nods. The transformation reached a breaking point when Emma suggested selling their father's tools. "They're worth nothing," she argued, gesturing at the weathered toolbox in the garage. "We should clear all this out." Maya found her mother crying in the garage that night, holding Hayes' worn work gloves. "He used to say these calluses were his badges of honor," Sarah whispered. "More valuable than any stock certificate." The next morning, Maya made a decision. She gathered the family in their living room, still furnished with the comfortable but worn furniture that held 15 years of memories. "Dad left us more than money," she began, pulling out one of his old lunch notes. "He left us a blueprint for how to live. Emma, remember when you broke your arm in 3rd grade? Dad worked overtime for months to pay the medical bills, or so we thought. He could have written a check, but instead he showed us how to face challenges." Emma touched her arm, remembering the construction site visits where Hayes had taught her about safety while secretly monitoring his former colleagues. "He didn't have to work at all," she said softly. No, Maya agreed. "He chose to. Every day he chose to teach us something more valuable than wealth, and now we have to choose too." Sarah watched her daughters, seeing Hayes' strength in Maya's conviction and his strategic mind in Emma's questioning nature. "Your father," she interjected, "used to say that wealth is like water. It can nourish or drown, depending on how you channel it. Something shifted in Emma's expression. She looked around their home, not at the things they lacked, but at the memories they'd built. The wall where Hayes had marked their heights every year, the kitchen table where he'd helped with homework after long days of physical labor, the backyard where he'd taught them to build and repair, his hands guiding theirs as they learned to create rather than simply consume. "I've been trying to erase him," Emma whispered, tears falling, "trying to replace everything he built with things he deliberately chose not to give us." Maya crossed to her sister, wrapping her in an embrace that carried 15 years of shared experiences. "He gave us everything," she said softly, "just not in the way the world measures wealth." Sarah watched her daughters, seeing them grasp the true value of their inheritance. The money in their accounts was substantial, but the real fortune was in the values Hayes had built, choice by choice, day by day, lunch note by lunch note. That evening they ate dinner together at their old kitchen table. Emma had changed out of her designer clothes into one of her father's old work shirts. Maya still wore his jacket. But Sarah served food on their familiar plates, and for the first time since Hayes's death, the empty chair at the table didn't feel like an absence, but a presence, a reminder of the man who had chosen to build his legacy not in luxury, but in love. Outside, the summer sunset painted their modest home in shades of gold that no amount of money could buy. The true transformation wasn't in their bank accounts or possessions, but in their understanding of what Hayes Parker had really left them, a wealth that couldn't be spent, only lived. The Harvard disciplinary hearing reconvened 2 weeks after Hayes Parker's funeral. Maya walked into the conference room alone, still wearing her father's jacket, but carrying herself with a new kind of confidence. The evidence from his toolbox remained untouched at home. This battle, she had decided, would be fought with the weapons he had given her long before money entered the equation. Principal Harrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by board members including Richard Thompson. Amanda Collins and her parents occupied one side, their lawyer's expensive suit a stark contrast to Maya's simple attire. Brandon Miller sat quietly in the corner, a subtle nod of support greeting Maya's entrance. "Miss Parker," Principal Harrison began, "given the circumstances of your father's passing, we considered dismissing this case. However, the Collins family has insisted on proceeding." "They would," Maya said quietly, removing a worn envelope from her father's jacket pocket, "just as they insisted 15 years ago when they destroyed other lives for profit." Richard Thompson's head snapped up, his face paling slightly. Maya pretended not to notice as she continued, "I'd like to read something if I may. The last lunch note my father wrote me." Without waiting for permission, she unfolded the paper, her father's shaky handwriting visible to all. "My dearest Maya, today you'll face people who measure worth in dollars and dignity in designer labels. Remember, true wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you give. I gave you everything I am. The rest is just paper. Love, Dad." This note, Maya's voice strengthened, was written by a man you all dismissed as a simple construction worker. A man who chose to build things with his hands rather than destroy lives with fraud. A man who taught me that character can't be bought or sold. Amanda Collins shifted uncomfortably as Maya turned to face her directly. "You claimed I stole your sweater. The truth is, my father bought it new. He had the receipt, the security footage, everything needed to prove my innocence. But he taught me something more valuable than proof. He taught me that my worth isn't determined by what I wear or what others think of me." Richard Thompson's lawyer started to speak, but Maya pressed on. "I could show you evidence right now that would end this hearing and raise questions about much bigger issues. But that's not why I'm here." She placed her Harvard acceptance letter on the table. "I earned this. Every grade, every achievement, every recommendation earned through work, not wealth. You can take it away based on a false accusation, but you can't take away what my father built in me." The room fell silent. Principal Harrison studied Maya with new eyes, seeing not the scholarship case, but a young woman whose strength had been forged by something more valuable than money. The sweater incident, Maya concluded, was never about theft. It was about the power to dismiss someone based on their perceived poverty. But my father taught me that true power lies in choosing how to use what you have, whether it's wealth or wisdom. Brandon Miller stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. I have here character references from every student Maya has tutored over the past 4 years. Including, he added pointedly, your son, Mr. Thompson. The one who got into MIT largely thanks to Maya's help. The implications hung in the air. Richard Thompson's face reddened as he remembered the many evenings Maya had spent helping his struggling son, never asking for payment, never mentioning that her father had once been his boss. Principal Harrison cleared his throat. Miss Collins, do you wish to maintain your accusation? Amanda looked at Maya, really looked at her for the first time. She saw not the poor scholarship student she'd tried to destroy, but someone who had chosen to face her accusers with dignity rather than destruction. No, Amanda said quietly. I was mistaken. The resolution came swiftly after that. The accusation was withdrawn, Maya's record cleared, her Harvard acceptance secured. But as the room emptied, she remained seated, touching her father's jacket pocket, where the real evidence still lay hidden. Richard Thompson lingered at the door. Miss Parker, he said stiffly, your father. He was more than he seemed, wasn't he? Maya met his gaze steadily. He was exactly what he chose to be, a man who built things that last. Some build fortunes, Mr. Thompson. My father built character. She walked out of the conference room, past the expensive cars in the parking lot, to where her mother and sister waited in their modest sedan. Emma, who had begun to understand the true value of their inheritance, hugged her tightly. Dad would be proud, Sarah whispered. Maya touched the lunch note in her pocket, feeling the strength of her father's legacy not in the millions he'd left them, but in the values he'd built into their very foundation. The evidence in his toolbox could wait. Some battles were won not by destroying others, but by standing firm in who you are. As they drove home, past the construction site where Hayes Parker had labored by choice rather than necessity, Maya understood that her father's greatest gift hadn't been the hidden fortune or the damning evidence. It had been the daily choice to build something more valuable than wealth, a legacy of character that no amount of money could buy or corrupt. Maya's 18th birthday arrived on a crisp autumn morning, 6 months after Hayes Parker's passing. The date had always been special. Her father had insisted on making it a celebration of family rather than finances, with homemade cakes and handcrafted gifts. This year, the empty chair at the breakfast table spoke louder than any celebration could. Mum, Maya called from the garage, where she'd gone to find some quiet. What's this? Sarah and Emma hurried out to find Maya standing before her father's workbench, holding a dusty key she'd discovered behind his old pegboard. A note had fluttered to the floor for Maya's 18th birthday, when the time is right. The storage facility was across town, a nondescript building Hayes had passed every day on his way to work. Unit 247 was at the back, its metal door unmarked except for a small construction company sticker, her father's final misdirection. Inside they found not wealth but wisdom. The unit was arranged like a museum of their lives, each section carefully curated to tell a story. On the left wall hung photographs: Hayes in his CEO days, Sarah in elegant evening wear, tiny Emma, and Maya in designer clothes. News clippings chronicled the rise of Parker Investments, ending abruptly with the headline "Parker steps down, corporate titan cites personal reasons." But it was the center of the room that caught their breath. A massive corkboard covered the wall, documenting 15 years of quiet investigation. String-connected photos to documents, surveillance logs to financial records. At its heart was a photo of the Collins and Thompson families at a charity gala, surrounded by evidence of their ongoing fraud. "My God," Sarah whispered. "He never stopped working." A metal desk sat beneath the board, its surface clean except for an old laptop and a single envelope marked Play Main. Maya's hands trembled as she opened the laptop, her father's face appearing on screen. "Hello, sweetheart. If you're watching this, you're 18 and I'm not there to share this day with you. But I've left you something more valuable than money. I've left you the truth and the choice of what to do with it." Hayes' recorded image smiled, the same gentle smile that had greeted them every morning. "The evidence here proves everything: the original fraud that forced me out, the continued schemes, their attempts to block your Harvard admission. But exposing it would hurt many innocent people, just as it would have 15 years ago." He leaned closer to the camera. "That's the burden of wealth, Maya, not just money, but knowledge. Power isn't in having these secrets, it's in choosing when and how to use them. Remember when you were little, and I taught you chess? It's not about taking pieces, it's about knowing which pieces to move and when." The screen split, showing surveillance footage: Hayes on construction sites, secretly recording conversations; Hayes in his truck, photographing clandestine meetings; Hayes at charity events, wearing his construction uniform while serving drinks, invisible to his former colleagues. "I chose to step down rather than fight because I saw a chance to teach you something more valuable than victory. But I kept watching, kept gathering evidence. Because a father's job is to protect his children, not just from harm, but from becoming the kind of people who cause harm." Tears streamed down Maya's face as her father's image continued. "The money in your trust fund is clean earned before I discovered the fraud. The evidence in this room is my real gift to you, not to use for revenge, but as protection if they ever try to hurt you again. More importantly, it's proof that wealth without character is poverty in disguise." Emma gripped Maya's shoulder as their father's final message played. "I've watched you grow into someone who understands that true richness isn't in a bank account. You fought that disciplinary hearing without using this evidence. You chose character over easy victory. That choice made me prouder than any amount of money ever could." The screen flickered as Hayes coughed, his illness visible even in the recording. "Today you're officially an adult, but you've been making adult choices for years. The evidence is yours now. Use it wisely, protect those who need protecting, and remember, we were never poor. We were rich in the only ways that matter." The video ended, but Hayes' presence filled the storage unit. Every photograph, every document, every piece of evidence represented years of patient work, a father building not just a case, but a legacy of justice and wisdom for his daughter. Sarah touched the corkboard gently. All those nights he came home exhausted. He was doing this. He was protecting us, Emma realized, not just with money, but with truth. Maya stood in the center of the unit, surrounded by her father's real fortune, not the millions in the trust fund, but the meticulous documentation of right and wrong, the patient gathering of truth, the careful preservation of justice for the moment it would be needed most. In her pocket, she felt the familiar shape of his last lunch note. The words seemed different now. True wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you give. Her father had given her not just evidence or money, but the wisdom to know when to use each. Outside, the autumn sun painted the storage facility in shades of gold. Inside Unit 247, Hayes Parker's greatest treasure stood, surrounded by his life's work, understanding at last that some inheritances can't be measured in dollars, and some fortunes are built not in boardrooms, but in the quiet moments when character meets choice. The discovery in the storage unit affected Sarah and Emma Parker in profoundly different ways. That evening, they sat in their modest living room, the weight of Hayes' secret legacy hanging between them. Emma held one of her designer handbags purchased in the weeks after his death with newfound discomfort. "I need to show you something," Sarah said quietly, disappearing into her bedroom. She returned with a small wooden box, its surface worn smooth by years of handling. Inside lay hundreds of photographs: Hayes in a bespoke suit addressing shareholders, Sarah in evening gowns at charity galas, their former mansion gleaming in the background. "Your father took these with him when we left," she explained, spreading them across the coffee table, not as memories of what we lost, but as reminders of why we chose this life. Emma picked up a photo of herself at age 4, wearing a dress that cost more than their current monthly mortgage payment. "I remember this day," she said softly. "The nanny took the picture because you and Dad were at a board meeting." "That's why we left," Sarah continued. "Hayes saw what wealth without values was doing to our family. The night he discovered the fraud, he came home to find you both asleep, waiting for parents who were too busy with money to make memories." Maya touched a photo of their former home. "It's beautiful." "It was empty," Sarah corrected. "No blanket forts, no family game nights, no Sunday pancakes. Just rooms full of expensive things and children being raised by staff." Emma's hands trembled as she lifted another photograph. Hayes at his CEO desk, looking polished but distant. "He looks lonely." He was. We all were. Sarah's voice carried years of understanding. "That's why he chose the construction job." He said building things with his hands made him feel more connected to what matters than moving millions with a signature ever did. The contrast between the photographs and their current life took on new meaning. What Emma had seen as deprivation, Maya had always recognized as intention. Every modest choice had been carefully crafted to build something more valuable than wealth. "Mom," Emma whispered, "I've been so wrong. Since Dad died, I've been trying to reclaim what I thought we lost. But we never lost anything, did we? We gained everything that matters." Sarah gathered her daughters close, feeling Hayes' presence in their growing understanding. "Your father used to say that true poverty is having money but missing moments. We chose this life because we wanted you to be rich in ways no bank can measure." The transformation was visible in Emma's eyes as she looked around their home, not at its modest furnishings, but at the memories embedded in every corner. The wall where Hayes had marked their heights each year, his construction pencil making permanent records of their growth. The kitchen table where he'd helped with homework after long days of physical labor, his calloused hands gentle on their shoulders. "I've been spending money like it could fill the empty space he left," Emma admitted, tears falling. "But Dad knew, he always knew, that emptiness can't be filled with things." Maya opened her father's jacket, which she still wore daily, and pulled out a stack of his lunch notes. "Look at these dates," she said, spreading them out. "He wrote these even on days when he was gathering evidence, when he was protecting us from something so much bigger than we knew." The sisters sat together, reading through years of daily wisdom penned by a millionaire disguised as a construction worker. Each note revealed not just a father's love, but a deliberate choice to build character rather than fortune. Sarah watched her daughters, seeing Hayes' legacy bloom in their understanding. Emma, who had responded to his death by embracing wealth, now held his old work gloves with reverence. Maya, who had inherited his strategic mind, saw the lunch notes as pieces of a larger lesson. "We should sell the designer clothes," Emma said suddenly. "Use the money the way Dad would have to build something real." The Hayes Parker Memorial Scholarship, Maya suggested, for students who understand that character outweighs currency. Sarah smiled, seeing her husband's values rise stronger than his wealth in their children's hearts. The transformation wasn't in their bank accounts, but in their understanding of what Hayes Parker had really left them: a fortune built, not in dollars, but in decisions. That night, Emma moved back into her old room, taking down the expensive art she'd bought and replacing it with her father's framed lunch notes. Maya hung his work jacket beside her Harvard acceptance letter, equal treasures in her eyes. Sarah sat in their kitchen, drinking coffee from the same chipped mug she'd used for years. Outside, their modest home stood solid and true, built not of marble and gold, but of countless choices that valued substance over show. "You were right, my love," she whispered to Hayes' empty chair. "True wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you give. And you gave them everything that matters." The autumn moonlight painted their home in silver, touching everything with the kind of grace that no amount of money could buy. In the quiet of their transformed understanding, The Parker women felt Hayes's presence not in the millions he'd left them, but in the values he'd built into their very foundation. The tranquility following Hayes Parker's birthday revelations shattered 3 days later when Olivia Thompson strode into Harvard Preparatory Academy's cafeteria, waving her phone triumphantly. On its screen was a viral social media post, a photograph of the Parker family entering their lawyer's office, with the caption exposed: "The poor family worth millions, the biggest scam at Harvard Prep." Maya sat at her usual quiet table, still wearing her father's jacket, when whispers erupted around her. Amanda Collins appeared beside Olivia, their previous enmity forgotten in the face of this new scandal. "So it was all fake," Amanda's voice carried across the suddenly silent cafeteria. The scholarship girl routine, the thrift store clothes, playing poor for sympathy. Your father must have laughed every day, watching everyone feel sorry for his little charity case. Maya's hands trembled around her homemade lunch, packed in the same containers her father had used for years. Inside, she knew, was a note her mother had continued writing, carrying on Hayes' tradition: "Remember who you are, not what they say you are." Brandon Miller stepped forward from the faculty table, but Maya raised her hand slightly, stopping him. This was her battle to fight exactly the kind of moment her father had prepared her for. "You think you've exposed something shameful," Maya said quietly, standing to face her accusers, "but all you've revealed is your own misunderstanding of what wealth really means." Olivia scoffed, scrolling through more photos on her phone. "Tell that to the scholarship committee. You took money meant for actually poor students. It's fraud." "I earned that scholarship," Maya countered, her voice steady. "Every grade, every achievement was real. The money my father left us doesn't change that." Your father, Richard Thompson's voice cut through the tension as he entered the cafeteria, was a liar who played everyone for fools. "The Board of Trustees is meeting this afternoon to discuss revoking your admission recommendation. The cafeteria fell silent, students and faculty watching as Maya faced the man who had helped drive her father from his company. She felt the weight of Hayes' evidence in her knowledge, the power of truth in her pocket. "My father," she said clearly, "taught me that character isn't built by what you have, but by what you choose to do with it." She turned to address the watching crowd. "Yes, we had money. We chose to live simply because wealth without values is poverty in disguise." "Values," Amanda sneered. "You're just as fake as those second-hand clothes." Maya pulled out her father's last lunch note, holding it up. "My father wrote me a note every day for 15 years. Not because we couldn't afford school lunch, but because he wanted me to understand that love and wisdom are the only wealth that matters." Richard Thompson stepped closer, his expensive suit a stark contrast to Maya's simple attire. "Your father was a coward who ran from his responsibilities." The words hung in the air like poison. Maya felt the USB drive in her jacket pocket, containing copies of everything from the storage unit. One email would send 15 years of evidence to the SEC, destroying the Thompson and Collins families forever. Instead, she smiled her father's gentle, knowing smile. "My father was the bravest man I've ever known. He chose integrity over influence, character over comfort, and love over luxury. That's not cowardice, Mr. Thompson, that's courage." The cafeteria had become absolutely still. Even Olivia's phone lowered as Maya continued. "You think you've exposed a scandal, but all you've revealed is your own poverty, the poverty of believing that bank accounts measure worth." She gathered her lunch containers, tucking her father's note carefully away. "I won't be at the board meeting this afternoon. I'll be at my father's grave, thanking him for teaching me what real wealth looks like. It looks like this jacket worn from honest work, like these lunch containers filled with daily love, like this scholarship earned through merit, not money." As she walked toward the door, Amanda called out, "You can't just walk away from this." Maya turned back one last time. "That's exactly what my father taught me, that sometimes walking away from wealth is the richest choice you can make." She left the cafeteria in stunned silence, her head high, her father's values wrapped around her like armor. Outside, the autumn sun caught the construction site across the street, where workers built something real and lasting, just as Hayes Parker had built an unshakable foundation in his daughter's character. That afternoon, as the board of trustees gathered to discuss her fate, Maya sat beside her father's grave, reading his lunch notes aloud. Each one revealed another layer of the legacy he'd left, not in the millions now causing such upheaval, but in the daily choices that had shaped her understanding of true worth. "You knew this would happen, didn't you, Dad?" she whispered, touching the carved stone. "You knew they'd try to use wealth to destroy what you built, but you built something stronger than money. You built character." The evidence that could destroy her accusers remained untouched in her pocket. Her father had given her the power to defend herself, but more importantly, he'd taught her when not to use it. True wealth, she realized, wasn't in having power, but in choosing how to wield it. As the sun set over the cemetery, Maya stood brushing grass from her father's jacket. Tomorrow would bring more battles, more choices, more opportunities to prove that Hayes Parker's greatest legacy wasn't in his bank accounts, but in the values he'd built into his daughter's heart. She touched the gravestone one last time, whispering, "True wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you give. And Dad, you gave me everything that matters." Harvard's withdrawal letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, exactly 1 month after the cafeteria confrontation. Maya stood in their modest kitchen, her father's jacket heavy on her shoulders as she read the carefully worded dismissal due to concerns about material omissions in your application and subsequent disciplinary issues. The mug she'd been holding, her father's favorite, chipped but cherished, slipped from her fingers, shattering on the linoleum floor. The sound seemed to break something inside her as well. Maya Sarah rushed in, finding her daughter on her knees, trying to gather the broken pieces with trembling hands. "It was his favorite," Maya whispered, her voice cracking. "He used it every morning. Even when he was sick, he'd hold it and pretend the coffee didn't taste like metal from his medications." Blood welled from where a shard had cut her palm, but Maya kept gathering pieces, her tears falling onto the scattered ceramic. "I can fix it. I have to fix it. He taught me how to fix things." Sarah knelt beside her daughter, gently taking the broken pieces from her bleeding hands. "Sweetheart." They took Harvard away. Maya's voice was barely audible. "Everything he worked for, everything he sacrificed for gone. Because we had money. Because we chose to live differently. Because he dared to teach us something more valuable than wealth." The breakdown, when it finally came, was devastating in its intensity. Months of holding herself together through her father's illness, through his death, through the revelations and accusations, collapsed like a dam breaking. "I keep wearing his jacket," Maya sobbed, clutching the worn fabric around herself. "Keep reading his lunch notes. Keep trying to be strong like he taught me. But I miss him, Mom. I miss him so much it hurts to breathe." Sarah held her daughter as she shook with grief. Remembering Hayes's words from their last private conversation, "She'll try to be strong for everyone else. Make sure she knows it's okay not to be." "I thought I understood," Maya continued, her words tumbling out between sobs. "Thought I knew why we lived the way we did. But now I keep wondering if it was worth it. All the pretense, all the careful choices, all the sacrifices, and in the end, they still took everything away." The kitchen floor was wet with tears and coffee, broken ceramic and broken dreams scattered across the linoleum Hayes had installed himself years ago. Through the window, they could see the neighbors' luxury cars, symbols of the life they could have had, the life Hayes had deliberately chosen to reject. "Harvard was my dream," Maya whispered, her voice hollow. "But it was his dream first. He worked so hard, planned so carefully. All those extra shifts weren't just about gathering evidence, they were about making sure I could have opportunities he thought were worth more than money." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, feeling the weight of Hayes's absence like a physical presence. "Your father used to say that sometimes we have to lose what we think we want to find what we truly need." "What I need is my dad." Maya's voice broke completely. I need his stupid jokes at breakfast. Need his construction pencil marking my height on the wall. Need his voice telling me that true wealth isn't in what you own. She couldn't finish the familiar phrase, grief finally overwhelming her carefully maintained composure. The morning light filtered through their kitchen window, catching the broken mug fragments and making them glitter like scattered diamonds on the floor. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them, something precious, shattered by the very truth it had helped to contain. "I don't know who I am anymore," Maya admitted, her voice small. The scholarship girl was real. The construction worker's daughter was real. But now I'm the secret millionaire's daughter who lost everything because we dared to value character over currency. Sarah held her daughter tighter, feeling Hayes' absence like a wound that would never fully heal. Outside, rain began to fall, mixing with the tears on Maya's face, as she finally allowed herself to be not the strong one, not the principled one, not the keeper of her father's legacy, but simply a grieving daughter whose world had shattered like the mug on their kitchen floor. In that moment of complete breakdown, Hayes' last words to his daughter echoed silently in the room. True wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you give. But for the first time since his death, Maya wondered if some prices were too high, even for the richest of lessons. The media storm hit the next morning. Secret millionaire's daughter scams Harvard blazed across local headlines, followed by exposes of the Parker family's deception. Reporters camped outside their modest home, turning Hayes' carefully chosen sanctuary into a fishbowl of speculation and judgment. Brandon Miller found Maya in the school library during lunch, hiding from the whispers and pointed fingers. She sat at her usual table, a stack of her father's lunch notes spread before her like a shield. "The faculty is fighting for you," he said quietly, sliding into the chair across from her. "We've written letters to Harvard explaining the circumstances, testifying to your character and achievements." Maya touched one of the notes, her father's handwriting blurring through her tears. "They're not just questioning my Harvard admission anymore. They're questioning everything, every grade, every test score, every achievement. As if having money in the bank somehow invalidates years of hard work." The irony was brutal. The same wealth Hayes had hidden to protect his daughter's character development was now being used to destroy everything Maya had built on her own merit. "The College Board is reviewing my SAT scores," she continued, her voice hollow. "The National Merit Committee is reconsidering my scholarship. It's like having money makes it impossible to have earned anything honestly." Through the library window, they could see Olivia Thompson giving an interview to a local news crew, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face as she described feeling betrayed by her former classmates' elaborate deception. "Your father, Brandon said, carefully anticipated something like this. That's why he kept all the evidence, isn't it?" Maya nodded, touching the USB drive in her jacket pocket. One email would end this, prove that the people destroying my reputation are the real frauds. But she trailed off, remembering her father's words in the birthday video: "Power isn't in having secrets, it's in choosing when to use them." The library door opened, and Amanda Collins walked in with her usual group. Their whispers carried deliberately, "I heard her father was mentally ill. Why else would a millionaire pretend to be poor?" Maya's hands clenched around her father's notes, but she forced them to relax. Hayes had taught her that reaction was a choice, that true strength lay not in striking back, but in standing firm. "They're reviewing my tutoring records," she told Brandon, her voice barely steady. "All those hours I spent helping other students, including Amanda's little brother, who's now at MIT, largely because of our study sessions. They're suggesting I was running some kind of cheating ring." Maya Brandon leaned forward. "You have the power to end this. Your father left you the means to defend yourself." "He left me more than that," Maya replied, gathering her father's notes with trembling hands. "He left me the wisdom to know that sometimes the cost of defense is higher than the cost of endurance." But endurance was becoming harder each day. That afternoon, Harvard's Academic Review Committee requested transcripts from every school Maya had attended since kindergarten. The local paper ran a feature comparing her SAT scores to those of legitimate scholarship students. Social media exploded with former classmates claiming they'd always known something was off about the Parker family. The final blow came in an email from the Harvard Housing Office rescinding her dormitory assignment due to pending review status. The carefully planned future Hayes had sacrificed everything to secure was unraveling thread by thread. Maya sat in her father's old truck in the school parking lot, surrounded by the life he'd chosen: the modest vehicle, the worn jacket, the packed lunch with its daily note. Each element of their supposedly fraudulent lifestyle had been carefully selected to build character, to teach values, to show that worth wasn't measured in dollars. Now those same choices were being used as evidence of deception, turning her father's legacy of integrity into a narrative of fraud. The truth that could save her reputation sat heavy in her pocket, but using it would mean betraying everything Hayes had taught her about the proper use of power. "Dad," she whispered to the empty truck, "I don't know if I'm strong enough to lose everything we built. Not Harvard, not my reputation, not the future you sacrificed so much to secure." Through the windshield, she could see more reporters gathering at the school gates. The simple life Hayes Parker had chosen for his family had become a national scandal, and his daughter's hard-earned achievements were crumbling under the weight of wealth she'd never wanted to claim. In that moment, Maya understood that some forms of poverty cut deeper than any lack of money: the poverty of having to choose between power and principle, between defense and dignity, between what is easy and what is right. The strain of the Harvard crisis fractured the Parker family's carefully rebuilt unity. Emma, struggling with her own guilt over her earlier materialism, lashed out during dinner after another day of media harassment. "This is ridiculous," she exploded, throwing down her fork. "We have the evidence. We could end this tomorrow. Maya's future is being destroyed because we're still playing by Dad's rules even though he's gone." Maya sat silent, picking at the meals served on their familiar plates, ones Hayes had always said held more memories than any fine china could. "Your father had his reasons," Sarah began, but Emma cut her off. "His reasons are destroying us. Look at Maya, she's lost everything she worked for. The media's camping outside our house. Our neighbors think we're frauds. And for what? To protect the same people who are tearing us apart." Emma Maya's voice was quiet. "Dad taught us that." "Dad's dead," Emma shouted, then immediately covered her mouth, horror at her own words visible in her eyes. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's hand shook as she set down her glass. "Your father may be gone, but his values." "His values," Emma laughed bitterly. "His values have us living in a fishbowl, being called liars and frauds, watching Maya's life implode, all because he wanted to teach us some twisted lesson about wealth." Maya stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor Hayes had installed himself years ago. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't make his choices sound small." They weren't his choices to make. Emma's voice cracked. He decided for all of us. Decided we should live like we were poor. Decided to keep gathering evidence instead of getting treatment that might have saved his life. Decided Maya should suffer now rather than use the truth to defend herself. The weight of unspoken grief and resentment filled the kitchen. Outside, camera flashes occasionally lit up their windows as photographers hoped to catch the fraudulent family in an unguarded moment. "I found his medical bills," Emma continued, pulling crumpled papers from her pocket. "The experimental treatment he refused? The one that might have given him more time? He could have afforded it, could have afforded anything. But he chose to keep playing construction worker, chose to keep his secret until it killed him." Sarah reached for her daughter, but Emma stepped back, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Maya. I know you want to honor his memory, but I can't watch you sacrifice everything for a lesson we've already learned." Maya touched her father's jacket, feeling the USB drive in its pocket. "It's not about the lesson anymore," she said softly. "It's about who we choose to be when everything is taken away. That's what Dad was really teaching us. Well, I choose not to watch my sister's life be destroyed. Emma grabbed her car keys to her old Honda, the Mercedes long since sold. I'm going to the media. Going to tell them everything about Thompson, about Collins, about the fraud Dad uncovered. Maybe then his death will mean something. Emma, stop! Sarah's voice cracked with authority she hadn't used since Hayes's death. Your father isn't here. Emma's hand was on the door. He chose his principles over his life, over our lives. But that's not my choice. I won't let Maya lose everything because Dad wanted to teach us one last lesson about integrity. Maya moved between her sister and the door. The evidence isn't yours to use. Then use it yourself, before Harvard's decision becomes permanent. Before your whole future disappears because we're too busy honoring Dad's choices to protect what he worked so hard to give you. The sisters stood facing each other, Hayes's daughters divided by their interpretation of his legacy. Through the window, another camera flash illuminated their modest kitchen, turning their private pain into public spectacle. Dad knew this would happen, Maya said finally. Knew they'd try to destroy us with the very wealth he protected us from. That's why he left us a choice, not just about the evidence, but about who we want to be. Emma's keys clattered to the floor as she finally broke down. I just want him back. Want to ask him why all this was so important, that he'd die for it, that he'd let you suffer for it. Sarah gathered both her daughters close, feeling Hayes's absence like a physical ache. Outside, reporters waited to document their fall. Inside, his family struggled with the cost of his principles, the weight of his choices, and the challenge of honoring a legacy that demanded everything while promising only the richest kind of poverty, the wealth of unshakable character bought at the price of everything else. The revelation began not with the evidence Hayes had gathered, but with an unexpected source. On a grey November morning, an elderly man in an expensive suit approached Maya as she sat on the school steps, still wearing her father's jacket despite the whispers around her. Miss Parker, he said quietly, leaning on his cane, I'm Albert Chen, former CFO of Parker Investments. Your father was more than my boss, he was my friend. Maya looked up, seeing kindness in his weathered face. You knew my father. Knew him? I watched him build an empire with nothing but integrity and brilliance. And I watched him walk away from it all when he discovered what Thompson and Collins were doing to people's pensions. Students passing by slowed to listen as Albert continued, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. Your father could have joined their scheme, made billions. Instead, he chose to protect thousands of families by refusing to participate. When they threatened to destroy him if he exposed them, he made a choice few wealthy men would make. Olivia Thompson had stopped nearby, her phone recording as Albert turned to face the gathering crowd. Hayes Parker didn't hide his wealth out of shame or deception. He hid it to protect his evidence, to keep watching, to make sure what happened 15 years ago couldn't happen again. What evidence? Richard Thompson's voice cut through the crowd as he strode forward, his face pale. Albert smiled Hayes's gentle, knowing smile. The evidence I've just delivered to the SEC, along with my full testimony. You see, while everyone watched Hayes Parker the construction worker, they forgot about me, the old CFO who kept copies of everything. The courtyard fell silent as Albert pulled out his phone, showing email notifications from federal investigators. The FBI is currently executing search warrants at Thompson Financial and Collins Industries. It seems your ongoing pension fraud scheme is finally coming to light. Maya stood slowly, feeling her father's presence in every word. Albert turned back to her, tears in his eyes. Hayes called me the night before he died. Asked me to wait until you had faced your own trials before revealing the truth. Let her learn who she is without wealth or power, he said. Then show the world who I was. Richard Thompson's phone began ringing urgently as reporters who had been stalking the Parkers suddenly found a bigger story. Olivia ran to her car, tears streaming down her face as she realized what was coming. Your father, Albert said softly to Maya, was the richest man I ever knew, not because of his bank account, but because he chose integrity when it cost him everything. He chose to live simply, not out of deception, but to teach you what real wealth looks like. Brandon Miller appeared beside Maya, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder as Albert continued. Hayes Parker didn't die a construction worker worth millions. He died a hero who sacrificed everything to protect thousands of families from the very people who tried to destroy his daughter's future. The evidence Maya carried in her pocket suddenly felt lighter. Her father had known someone else would speak the truth, had ensured his daughter wouldn't have to choose between power and principle. Even in death, he had protected her from having to use wealth as a weapon. "There's more," Albert said, handing Maya a thick envelope. "Your father asked me to give you this once the truth was out. It's his testimony, everything he saw, everything he gathered, everything he sacrificed to protect. Not just for justice, but to show you that true wealth isn't in what you own. But in what you give." Maya finished, touching her father's jacket as the morning sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the truth that had been there all along. The dominoes fell quickly after Albert Chen's revelation. Federal agents swarmed Thompson Financial and Collins Industries, carting away boxes of documents that confirmed 15 years of systematic fraud. But the real story emerged through Hayes Parker's testimony, now public record. "I discovered the pension fraud by accident," Hayes had written. "Small discrepancies that grew larger as I dug deeper." Richard Thompson and James Collins weren't just stealing from current pension funds, they were recreating the same scheme we stopped 15 years ago, targeting the children of their original victims. The evidence was damning. Amanda Collins's designer clothes, Olivia Thompson's luxury cars, all paid for with money stolen from working families' retirement funds. The same families whose children now attended Harvard Preparatory Academy on scholarship, struggling to afford textbooks while their classmates spent their parents' stolen wealth. "When I learned my daughter was being bullied by the children of these men," Hayes' testimony continued, "I realized nothing had changed. The same people who destroyed families 15 years ago were now teaching their children to mock the victims of their crimes." Local news stations ran split-screen footage of Olivia Thompson mocking Maya's second-hand clothes alongside documents showing her father's extensive fraud, Amanda Collins claiming theft over a sweater, while her parents' company documents revealed millions in stolen pension funds. The irony was breathtaking. The poor scholarship girl they had tormented was actually the daughter of the man who had sacrificed everything to protect families like theirs. Every taunt about Maya's worn backpack, every joke about her packed lunches had been witnessed by a father who chose to let his daughter face their cruelty rather than expose their parents' crimes prematurely. "I could have stopped the bullying at any time," Hayes had written, "could have exposed their parents' fraud, restored my reputation, given my daughters the luxury their tormentors flaunted. But that would have taught them the wrong lesson that power and money are the answers to injustice." Brandon Miller found Maya in the library, reading her father's testimony through tears. "He was there," she whispered. "Every time they mocked our lifestyle, every time they called us poor, he was gathering evidence of where their wealth really came from." The school hallways had become strangely quiet. Olivia and Amanda were conspicuously absent, their parents' faces plastered across national news. The same students who had whispered about the Parkers' deception now whispered about the true fraud that had been happening right before their eyes. "Your father," Brandon said softly, "built something more valuable than wealth. He built a case that will help thousands of families recover their stolen pensions, and he built daughters strong enough to face injustice without becoming unjust." Maya touched her father's jacket, feeling the weight of the evidence she had chosen not to use. Hayes had known the truth would emerge eventually, had trusted his daughter to hold power without wielding it as a weapon. Every construction shift, every packed lunch, every modest choice had been part of a larger plan to expose corruption while protecting his children's character. The real fraud, Hayes' testimony concluded, wasn't in hiding our wealth. It was in allowing wealth to hide the truth about character. My daughters learned to measure worth by actions, not assets. Their tormentors learned that wealth without values is poverty in disguise. Outside the library window, federal agents were interviewing school board members about their connections to Thompson and Collins. The same people who had questioned Maya's integrity were now facing questions about their own. And through it all, Hayes Parker's final lesson echoed, true wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you give, even if what you give is the chance for justice to emerge in its own time. The full scope of Hayes Parker's motivations emerged through a series of video diaries found in the storage unit, recorded over 15 years of voluntary simplicity. Each entry revealed another layer of the legacy he'd built, not in wealth, but in wisdom. People will call this deception. Hayes' image spoke from the laptop screen dated just months before his death. They'll say I lied to my children about our wealth, but every choice, every modest living arrangement, every construction shift was a carefully crafted lesson in what matters most. Maya, Amma, and Sarah sat in their living room watching the videos, their modest surroundings now a testament to intentional choice rather than necessary sacrifice. On screen, Hayes continued working even as his illness progressed, his voice growing weaker but his conviction stronger. The Thompson and Collins children mocked my daughters for being poor, he recorded after a particularly difficult day. They don't realize their own poverty, the poverty of character that comes from wealth without values. My girls are learning something more valuable, that worth isn't in what you own, but in who you become. The videos revealed careful planning behind every aspect of their lives. Hayes had chosen their neighborhood specifically to monitor his former colleagues' ongoing fraud. Each construction job had allowed him to gather evidence while teaching his daughters the value of honest work. Even their modest home had been selected for its strategic location near the school where the children of his former partners would eventually reveal their learned prejudices. I could expose them today, Hayes recorded after Maya's first encounter with bullying. It would show everyone where their wealth really comes from. But that would teach Maya to solve problems with power rather than principle. Instead, I'll let her learn to stand strong in who she is, not what she owns. Emma wept openly as they watched their father explain his choices. When they discover our wealth, he predicted they'll call it a lie. But the real lie was their belief that money equals worth. My daughters will know better. They'll understand that character built through adversity is the only fortune that can't be stolen or spent. The most revealing entry came from the night Hayes received his terminal diagnosis. The doctors offer experimental treatments, he shared, his face gaunt but peaceful. Treatments I could easily afford. But my greatest investment isn't in extending my life, it's in ensuring my daughters understand what makes a life worth living. Maya touched the screen as her father continued, they'll face trials when I'm gone. Questions about our choices, accusations about our lifestyle. But those challenges will reveal whether I succeeded in teaching them the difference between having wealth and being rich. Sarah paused the final video, dated just days before Hayes' death. Your father, she said softly, wasn't just protecting evidence of financial fraud. He was protecting you from the kind of poverty that wealth without values creates. Emma touched her father's old work gloves, understanding at last. He chose construction work because it let him build two things at once: evidence against corruption and character in his daughters. Every lunch note, Maya realized, every modest choice, every lesson in values, it was all part of a bigger plan. Not just to expose fraud, but to ensure we understood what real wealth looks like. They resumed the video, watching Hayes record his final thoughts. My daughters will inherit millions, but that's not my legacy. My legacy is in the strength they've built, the values they've learned. The understanding that true wealth isn't in bank accounts, but in the choices we make when those choices cost us everything. The screen faded to black, but Hayes' presence filled their modest living room, not in the revelation of hidden millions, but in the recognition that every aspect of their seemingly simple life had been carefully crafted to build something money couldn't buy. unshakable character forged in the crucible of chosen adversity. Harvard's letter of reinstatement arrived on a bright December morning, accompanied by a formal apology and an additional merit scholarship. The media storm had shifted from the Parkers' deception to the larger story of corporate fraud and justice served. But Maya stood in their kitchen, holding both letters with a newfound understanding. "I don't need their apology," she said quietly to Sarah and Emma. "Dad already gave us everything that matters." The transformation in their family was profound. Emma had sold her designer clothes, using the money to establish a scholarship fund for students affected by the Thompson-Collins fraud. Sarah continued making packed lunches with daily notes, carrying on Hayes' tradition of building wealth through wisdom rather than money. "We're keeping this house," Emma announced one morning, surprising them all. "Not because we can't afford better, but because Dad built something here that no mansion could contain." The modest home that had once felt like a symbol of artificial poverty now stood as a testament to intentional choices. Every room held memories of Hayes' lessons: the kitchen, where he taught them to find richness in simple moments, the garage where his tools still hung, waiting to build something real. Brandon Miller visited on a snowy afternoon, bringing news from Harvard Preparatory Academy. The school board has established the Hayes Parker Integrity Scholarship, he shared, full tuition for students who demonstrate exceptional character in the face of adversity. Maya touched her father's jacket, which she still wore despite now having access to any designer label she desired. Dad would have liked that she smiled, using wealth to recognize character rather than create it. The changes rippled through their community. Former critics now spoke of Hayes Parker with respect, understanding that his choice to live simply had protected countless families from financial ruin. The construction workers who had known him as a colleague shared stories of his quiet generosity, revealing how he had helped many of them avoid the pension fraud that had targeted their savings. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, the Parker women gathered in their living room. The same room where Hayes had built blanket forts and taught life lessons now held a different kind of wealth, the wealth of understanding his true legacy. "I found this," Emma said, pulling out an old photo album. Inside were pictures of their father at construction sites, his genuine smile belying any notion of deception. Each image showed him building something, not just structures, but the foundation of his daughter's character. Sarah opened Hayes' toolbox, which they had decided to keep as a reminder. Inside lay his worn work gloves, each callous and stain a badge of chosen labor rather than necessary toil. "Your father," she said softly, "built his greatest legacy not in what he left us, but in who he helped us become." Maya reached into her father's jacket pocket, touching the familiar shape of his last lunch note. The words she had memorized took on new meaning. "True wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you give." "He gave us everything," Emma realized, tears falling. "Not just the money or the evidence, but the strength to face adversity without becoming bitter, the wisdom to hold power without being corrupted by it." Through their window they could see reporters still occasionally driving by, hoping for comments on the ongoing fraud investigation. But the story they sought was not in the millions Hayes had left his family or the corruption he had exposed. The real story was in the modest home where a millionaire had chosen to live simply, building a fortune of character that no market could crash and no fraud could steal. Maya stood at the window watching snowflakes catch the streetlights glow. "Dad used to say that true wealth shows itself in how you use what you have," she said softly. "I think I finally understand what he meant." The Justice Department's investigation into Thompson Financial and Collins Industries concluded swiftly, armed with 15 years of meticulously gathered evidence. In a twist of poetic justice, the court proceedings took place in the same federal building where Hayes Parker had first discovered the pension fraud years ago. Amanda Collins and Olivia Thompson sat with their families in the courtroom as prosecutors presented Hayes' testimony, the words of a man they had dismissed as a simple construction worker, now sealing their parents' fate. The evidence was irrefutable: decades of systematic fraud, millions stolen from working families' pensions, and a web of corruption that had ensnared some of Boston's most prominent citizens. Hayes Parker, the prosecutor announced, spent 15 years building not just buildings, but a case that would protect thousands of families from financial ruin. His choice to live modestly wasn't deception, it was dedication to justice. Maya attended the sentencing hearing wearing her father's jacket, now a symbol of chosen integrity rather than enforced poverty. She watched as Richard Thompson and James Collins faced the families they had defrauded, including many whose children she had tutored at Harvard Preparatory Academy. The judge's words were pointed: Mr. Parker's testimony reveals not just financial crimes, but a profound moral failure. While he chose to live simply to protect others, you chose to steal simply because you could. As federal agents led the convicted men away, Olivia caught Maya's eye. Gone was the designer-clad bully who had tormented the poor scholarship girl. In her place stood someone who finally understood that her family's wealth had been poverty in disguise. Amanda approached Maya after the sentencing. "I never understood," she said quietly. "All those times I mocked your clothes, your lunch, your life. Your father was watching my parents steal from people who looked just like you pretended to be." "We never pretended," Maya replied gently. "Dad chose that life to teach us what real wealth looks like. I'm sorry you never had the chance to learn the same lesson." The aftermath brought sweeping changes. Thompson Financial and Collins Industries were ordered to repay hundreds of millions in stolen pensions. The families Maya had tutored would receive full restitution, their children's educational futures secured by the very evidence Hayes had gathered while helping them study. Brandon Miller found Maya in the courthouse hallway after the sentencing. "Your father," he said softly, "built something more valuable than any fortune. He built a case for justice while building character in his daughters." The media coverage shifted dramatically. Headlines that had once screamed about the Parkers' deception now praised Hayes' extraordinary sacrifice. Features that had questioned their modest lifestyle now celebrated it as a masterclass in principled living. But the true victory wasn't in the headlines or the court's decision. It was in the quiet dignity with which Hayes Parker's family had faced adversity, in the strength of character he had built through years of chosen simplicity. Albert Chen, who had helped bring the truth to light, summed it up best: Hayes Parker could have been another wealthy man who looked away from corruption. Instead, he chose to become a working man who stood up for justice. His true wealth wasn't in his bank account. It was in his courage to choose principle over privilege. As Maya left the courthouse, she passed construction workers repairing the building's steps. Like her father, they were building something real, something that would support others long after they were gone. She touched the lunch note in her pocket, feeling the weight of his legacy not in the millions now restored to their rightful owners, but in the unshakable foundation of character he had built in his children. Justice had been served, but Hayes Parker's greatest victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the lives he had touched, the values he had instilled, and the understanding that true wealth isn't measured in verdicts or bank accounts, but in the choices we make when those choices matter most. 1 year after Hayes Parker's death, Maya stood at the podium of Harvard's freshman orientation, her father's jacket still draped over her shoulders despite the late summer heat. The story of the construction worker who had exposed corporate fraud while teaching his children invaluable lessons about wealth had become legend, but Maya was there to share a different kind of truth. "My father," she began, "could have given me everything money could buy. Instead, he gave me something far more valuable. He showed me what true wealth looks like." The auditorium was packed with students, including several whose families had recovered their pensions thanks to Hayes' evidence. In the front row, Emma sat beside Sarah, both wearing simple clothes that spoke of choice rather than necessity. "People think our story is about a rich man who pretended to be poor," Maya continued. "But it's really about a man who understood that character isn't built by what you have, but by what you choose to do with it." She pulled out one of her father's lunch notes, now laminated and worn from frequent handling. Every day, my father wrote me a note like this. Not because we couldn't afford school lunch, but because he knew that daily wisdom is worth more than any trust fund. The Hayes Parker Memorial Scholarship had been established at Harvard, awarded not based on financial need or academic achievement alone, but on demonstrated character in the face of adversity. Maya had helped design the criteria, ensuring it would honor her father's true legacy. My father left me millions, she told the silent auditorium, but his real gift wasn't in the inheritance. It was in showing me that wealth without values is the worst kind of poverty, and that true riches are built in moments of choice, not moments of plenty. Brandon Miller watched from the side as his former student shared the lessons that had cost her father everything and given her something priceless. The construction company where Hayes had worked had created a training program in his honor, teaching young workers not just how to build structures, but how to build character. Today, Maya concluded, I'm announcing the creation of the Parker Foundation for Ethical Leadership. We'll use my father's fortune not just to fund scholarships, but to teach what he lived, that integrity isn't for sale, that character counts more than currency. And that true wealth isn't in what you own. ... but in what you give the audience. Finished with her, Hayes Parker's signature phrase having become a motto for a new generation of leaders. After the ceremony, Maya stood in Harvard Yard, watching students scatter to their first classes. She touched her father's jacket pocket, where she still carried his last lunch note. The inheritance he'd left her had turned out to be exactly what he'd intended, not just millions in a trust fund, but millions of moments that had built unshakable character. Sarah and Emma joined her, their modest lifestyle now a choice that honored Hayes's legacy, rather than a deception that hid it. Together they had learned his final lesson that some fortunes can't be measured in dollars, and some inheritances are built not in bank vaults, but in the daily choices that reveal who we truly are. As the autumn sun painted Harvard's buildings in shades of gold, Maya thought of her father. Somewhere, Hayes Parker was watching his daughter start her college journey not as the secret millionaire's heir, but as exactly who he had raised her to be, someone who understood that true wealth isn't about what you own, but about who you become in the moments when character matters more than currency. His greatest legacy lived on not in the millions he'd left them, but in the millions of lives touched by his example of chosen integrity over enforced luxury, of principle over privilege, of character over currency. Thank you for experiencing this emotional journey with us. If this story touched your heart and resonated with your own values, we deeply appreciate your support. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. What did Hayes Parker's legacy mean to you? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more meaningful stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Help us spread these messages of integrity and love by sharing this video with your friends and family. Your likes and engagement enable us to continue creating content that touches hearts and changes lives. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community.